Hey guys, John Wooten here. Today I want to talk to you about Jim Cramer's Get Rich Carefully. Super cool book here, big one for finance. So you got to be super hard into it, but it was actually really cool. Definitely not like a starter book for personal finance and investing, but a really cool book for underlying long-term investment principles and learning more about, how to look at the whole economy, sort of like a macroeconomic look of it, based on individual companies, based on stocks, based on portfolio analysis, which is really cool. He goes through a lot of very specific companies, and those are the companies that he looks at to, understand very different factors of the economy. And it was cool because, I've been doing this for a little bit now, quite a while, and a lot of the companies that he points out, are huge ones in the marketplace that I've, personally traded, seen other people trade, and analyzed, the annual reports of, stuff like that. And it was really cool because a lot of what he said definitely hit home and was super true, especially when he looks at, he's got like companies like Caterpillar, right? And he's like, okay, or Toll Brothers, right? Like these are companies that are based on construction, so they're based on debt. And then if you look at Toll Brothers, it's like, okay, well, how are the banking stocks going to do based on, how many people are buying these super expensive homes, getting mortgages or whatever, which is cool because, it's like, it makes sense and it's really great for long-term investing. You boil down these principles and you can use them as a way to understand sort of like what you're getting into, especially with long-term investments with your overarching portfolio. We talk about at 9 to noon, like diversification, right? There's a lot of, dependence where things are very closely interweaved, especially when they're in the same industry or close to the same industry. And what Jim does is he breaks down sort of the stocks to look for in very specific industries, and then how you can use those as a way to predict the overall growth of that industry. So taking maybe one or two companies out of biotech and using them to look at the overall growth of biotech. And then he also goes through some really cool principles about like why news isn't necessarily the biggest deal and how come the Fed doesn't matter too much when you're looking at short-term changes, which is totally cool, totally, resonated with that because it just isn't a big deal in the long term. And he talks down why it doesn't matter, and then he goes to experience, right? Like he's been doing this for decades and decades. So it's really great to see the experience that comes out of that, looking at long-term investments, looking at long-term portfolio performance, and those are some of the biggest benefits that you'll see with this book in particular, which is super cool stuff because it gives you a better grasp, especially when you're really starting to plan that long-term portfolio of, especially, if you're younger and you're going more in stocks, or mid-age and you're still going more with stocks, you gotta like know what's going on so that once you plan it, once you get it together, you're gonna understand what are the economic factors that are going to actually affect this portfolio. What are the things that are going to legitimately change the way that this book, the stocks, have an impact on whatever it is that you do, right? So super important to have that understanding and to have that background. And that was about, I'd say, the first 200 pages of the book. And then after that, he starts to talk a little bit more about the work he's done with media, the work he's done on his show, which is super cool. And then he, reflects on how the people he's worked with and talked to have grown his personal funds and his personal development journey through the market based on, the people he talks to and the stocks that they give him. And he does something really cool about halfway through is he starts to go through a bunch of stocks, just huge companies over and over. He goes through like 20 companies all at once, and then a bunch of other ones. And then he goes through some of like the biggest funds that he's seen, which is cool. A lot of times halfway through, it kind of felt more like a talk show. Read a little bit like, I was watching Mad Money, which was awesome because he's just like, this is what I think about this position, which is cool. It was definitely cool. Not necessarily to act on it without doing further analysis through technical, analysis. But, you guys know me, right? Like I'm always looking for tickers. So there were some pretty sweet tickers in there based on the technical analysis, not necessarily the fundamentals. But the fundamentals matter. The fundamentals are what get the stocks in the door. And then after they're in the door, you take them to that position, that full-size commitment through technical analysis, through that, fundamental technical analysis. It's just amazing. It's the 2 words that changed my life. But anyway, so what he does is he breaks down sort of the fundamentals, and then you can learn a little bit more about his thought process, which is awesome, especially if you're newer to the market, because these are some super important principles for understanding long-term growth and understanding exactly, how to, dare I say, judge a position based on its name, based on its positioning in the marketplace, before you even start to look at the charts, because that's going to give you a significant advantage with long-term investments and swing trades on top of those technicals, right? So you understand technicals, but then if you know this background about the position, if you know this background about the company, it's going to give you just that slight edge where you're able to understand more the change that's coming from the position, and also the where they are in the marketplace, how they're functioning, which is super, super cool. And that's what Jim breaks down a whole bunch of positions for. It's just a bunch of individual stocks, and he goes through and says this and this and this and this about all of them. So it's really cool stuff. You got to be into stocks a little bit. You got to like stocks. But if you like stocks, it's freaking cool. And then he has this really cool thing. I'm kind of jealous of him. He was able to like get his publisher to like actually print colored graphs, which like seriously, I wish I could have done this. I'm so jealous. It's cool. He's got like candlesticks, and he doesn't really like introduce technical analysis at all. It just kind of like goes from talking about Caterpillar, which are the people that make those giant machines everywhere, which is cool because he talks about how Caterpillar is this global player, and how the stock price of Caterpillar is influenced by international development, because nobody is going to like buy these, and also credit markets too, because with business credit cycles, they're going to have more or less rental ability to use Caterpillar equipment to expand their company or whatever it is that they're doing, which is cool because it's a very, very specific part of the credit market that usually you won't see with American Express or Visa, right? Those are more consumer, more mass clients than that business-to-business side. So it's cool to see some great insights with Caterpillar. I know I saw a lot of trades that I've personally made in the past couple years in this book, just as fundamental long-term plays, which was cool because the thought processes I went through when I was analyzing them were pretty much the same as what Jim's talking about here. And if you guys are interested, right, the way to go through those thought processes is really to, at a fundamental level, just read what the company does, check out their Wikipedia page, and if you don't get it from there, you don't get it from the graph, you don't get it from the technicals, just like freaking read the annual report. You read that annual report, you're going to be golden. I talk about it a lot. I mean, that's really, really valuable stuff right there. But anyway, Jim, he doesn't necessarily introduce technical analysis, but he has like 5, or I feel like this is like probably 10 pages, give or take, 10, maybe 12. So like 12 pages, and all he has are stocks charts. And the stock charts, I mean, I was like literally laughing my face out. I was so excited to see this. I was super, super geeking out when I saw these stock charts. I was super, super excited. He's got trend lines. He's got head and shoulders setups. He's got moving averages, MACD, stochastics, RSI, Bollinger Bands. I mean, everything I talk about in part 2 of 9 to noon. It was so happy to see this. The only thing, and the support and resistance lines are a little bit sketchy. He doesn't really identify the wedges, even though there are totally some great wedges here. But with, only thing with it is like, this isn't really a beginner book, I don't think, because first of all, he starts off going super, super hard into like, this is the economy and this is how it works and this is why your investments are, important and whatever. But he doesn't like, I feel like it's more like he starts off going really hard into like very, very specific parts of the economy, but not necessarily like beginner parts of the economy. So he talks like in the first couple pages, first couple chapters about, how these global economic factors influence index funds and stuff. So like you've got to have that base understanding of, what stuff is. Like that's why like that base 9 to noon stuff or whatever. And then that's a little bit, further exemplified later in the book because he starts to, talk about these technical chart patterns. But the way he talks about them is he shows every single picture first, I guess, to get them in color, which is totally cool. And then he goes back and talks about them. So there's not really a clear reference back to the images. And also he talks about technical indicators, technical setups. And the problem is like, he doesn't explain what any of them are, right? So he doesn't like tell you what any of the indicators do, what stochastics are, what, all these tremendously powerful indicators that are worth literally, so much, double your portfolio. I mean, it's insane. These are the gateway in outperforming market returns, and he shows them, but he doesn't really teach them as much. So it's like you have to have that education coming into the book, and if you have the education coming into the book, it's a pretty fun read. I mean, if you like stocks, right? I feel like you get a lot of good long-term principles from it. The biggest thing is probably about that first half, first 3/4 of the book, long-term principles. Then after that, he sort of talks more about some fundamental stuff like, you know, psychology and emotions, which are what I talk about a lot on the Stock Market Secrets podcast, which is, you know, what I worked on for a very long time now to, you know, get that out to you guys. Super excited about that. That's sort of more like what the last part of the book is about. It's like, you know, don't sell when the entire market crashes because that's the worst time to sell, which makes sense, right? Yeah, 100%. So it's cool to see him do that. It makes sense, understanding that, like, these are, you know, years and years and years and years and years of trading, you know, put down into this one book where he's put the disciplines there. He's, you know, not as much with the technical stuff. It's just a little bit iffy, which is totally cool, not a big deal. But not as much on that. It's more on that fundamental long-term analysis, that fundamental swing trading analysis, and looking at like overarching movements in the economy and then basing positions off that. So usually with those swing trades, with those long-term investments, you're going to see lower average percent returns for your positions, but still really cool, you know, trading perspective. And you can mix that with technical analysis. And if you can mix those two together, you're just going to have a tremendously strong background. Let's go to, like, you know, part 1 of 9 to Noon was all about establishing that. And I think this is really nice because it goes into it just a little bit more and you learn a lot more about, you know, what are the principles that you can use. And also, here are a ton of samples, a ton of companies that he's going to run through for you to show you an example of him using those principles so you can model the thinking that he uses. You can model the underlying concepts he has as a way to, you know, go out there and succeed and crush it in the marketplace. So super cool stuff, guys. Hope you've got some value out of this. Have an amazing day. I'll leave a link below. You can grab this book. Highly recommend it for people who have that understanding of it and want to, you know, get rich carefully, especially with long-term portfolio planning. Super, super powerful content. Awesome stuff, guys. Thank you so, so much. Have an amazing day. I'll see you later. Thanks.